Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. Today, I was going to go through planetary transits, or Gochara, as they're known as in Sanskrit, for September 2024. This is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, so ancient Indian astrology. And I'm not sure this, I usually do a theme kind of the month. I'm not sure it's a theme of the month, but it might be a little bit of advice of riding the waves. So we'll talk about that. Yeah. Note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. Then you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. Okay, so if you're new to Vedic astrology, Jyotish, or my videos, all of my teaching videos on the subject are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. Wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. I'm very good at organizing my videos into playlists. So if there's something, a particular topic you'd like to learn more about, I have different playlists. So like Graha's Planets playlist, a Bhava's Houses playlist, a Yoga's Planetary Combination playlist. So you might check out, the different playlists to see if there's a area you want to focus on to learn. Also, if you like to learn astrology by looking at charts of famous people, places, or moments in time, I have a video titled Birth Chart Archive List 2024, where I list all the different famous charts I've analyzed on the channel and the video you can find them in. Because just like this talk, monthly video, I'm going to analyze three different famous charts. But from the title of the video, you would never know that I have three famous charts I'm going through. So there you go. Helpful videos to watch with this one, if you're new or want to learn more. So North, South, and East Indian style charts. I also cover Western style charts in that video as well. Introduction to navigating a birth chart. The lugna, also known as the ascendant, rising sign, first house. Introduction to the constellations of Rashis. Constellation of Rashi categories. Planetary aspects. Directional strength or digbala, swagraha, there are planets in their own sign or star, natural benefic and malefic planets or grahas, karako bhava, planet friends and enemies or graha mitra shatru, bhavat bhavam, planetary war or graha yuddha, planetary combustion or asta, planetary exaltation, debilitation, uccha, nicha, planetary retrogression or vakri, nakshatras, also known as lunar mansions. And then we have different yogas I'll be talking about. So, pravraja yoga, kala sarpa yoga, parivartana yoga, saraswati yoga, budhaditya yoga, solar yogas, lunar yogas. So there's a lot of yogas. And then also we're heading into eclipse season, and we've got one this month. So I also have a video on lunar and solar eclipses, generally speaking, sort of the astronomy behind it, but also from a very basic Vedic astrology point of view. What's a general interpretation of those moments in time. All right, so there you go. Okay, so let's take a look at what the dates are when things are moving in the sky, and then we'll talk about what all this means in the other slides. So September 2nd, there's a new moon in Leo or Simha in the nakshatra of Purna Falguni. September 4th, Mercury enters Leo or Simha, and also simultaneously Maga nakshatra. And that same day, Venus crosses Ketu. September 6th, Mars enters Ardra nakshatra. September 8th, Saturn and Sun have an exact mutual aspect with each other. September 12th, Venus enters Chitra nakshatra. September 13th, Sun enters Uttar Falguni nakshatra, and Mercury enters Purva Falguni nakshatra. September 14th, Mercury goes combust or asta. September 15th, Jupiter has an exact aspect on Venus. September 16th, Mars has an exact aspect on Ketu. And Sun enters Virgo Kanya, which is a samkranti, which is a changing of constellations for the Sun. Then September 17th, we have a lunar eclipse or chandra grahan in Pisces or Mina in Purva Bhadrapada. September 18th, Mercury and Saturn have an exact mutual aspect on each other, and Venus enters Libra Tula. September 21st, Mercury enters Uttar Falguni Nakshatra. September 23rd, Mercury enters Virgo or Kanya, and Venus enters Swati Nakshatra. September 26th, Sun enters Hasta Nakshatra. September 28th, Sun crosses Ketu. Mercury and Mercury enters Hasta Nakshatra. On September 29th, Mercury crosses Ketu. Mars enters Purnavasu Nakshatra. And just to mention it, since it's so close to the first of the month, October 2nd, we're going to have a solar eclipse or surya grahan in Virgo or Kanya, and that's going to be in Asta Nakshatra. All right, so you got the dates of when things are shifting around. Okay, so then what I usually do is look at the sky patterns in terms of how the sky looks at the beginning of the month of September and then at the end of the month. So on the left here, we have a chart for September 1st, 2024. The time happens to be 21:04 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is not too significant because what I've done in both of these charts is to line them up so that the Aries, the first or Mesha, is the first constellation of the zodiac, is in the first house. And what that does is it creates a natural zodiac. And the natural zodiac with the first constellation, the first house, is kind of like a birth chart for the whole planet, the whole of humanity. So you can kind of see this collective energy. Yeah. So in this first chart on the left, on the first of the month, again, Aries rising here, or Aries Lugna. Lugna is the rising sign. So if you're new to my way of doing astrology, these are North Indian style charts that I use. And so to find the lugna, which other names for it are the ascendant, rising sign, first house, you go to the diamond at the top middle of the chart. In these charts, there's a little one. It's mostly covered up with all these lines, but there's a little one in the bottom corner. That one is not for the first house. That one is for the first constellation of the zodiac, which is Aries or Mesha. Okay. So, and then to count houses in a North Indian style chart, you go counterclockwise or kind of backwards, if you will. So from the house, that diamond in the top with the one in the bottom, then you go up and to the left, and there's a diamond, or not a diamond, it's a triangle with a two in the bottom corner. That's the second house, and then you go around, okay, to the through the 12th house. Okay, so in this chart on the September 1st, um, the moon nakshatra is a lunar mansion. So there are 27 nakshatras, and the moon travels through one of these lunar mansions every night. So after about 27 nights, you get a lunar month. Okay? And each of these nakshatras has a different energy and symbolism and deities associated with them. The other thing about nakshatras is they're the oldest part, even though they're not so much emphasized. I mean, I do, but generally speaking, I don't hear so many people talk about nakshatras so much. But I don't know. I guess for me, I love nakshatras because that was the first part of Vedic astrology I really learned. So it's a deep part of my practice and offering. So anyway, the moon nakshatra is in Maga. So Maga is symbolized by a throne. And so we've got leadership here. The other thing is Maga represents Regulus, the star of Regulus, which is the heart of the lion in the Leo or Simha constellation or Rashi. So, and Regulus, Maga, this part of the sky is thought to be the place where ancestors reside. Okay. The other thing is the moon represents mother, but also queen potentially. So we could be looking at female leadership here specifically. Okay. Especially because the moon is with the sun. You know, that's always going to be true during well, we're going to have a new moon tomorrow. But the other thing is that this is all happening in Simha. So this is a leadership fire, fixed fire sign here. In this chart, it happens to be the fifth house, and the fifth house represents things like a stage or performance art. So this could be, women leaders stepping up potentially. Or you could even say like honoring female ancestors, I would say here. So the Dasha period, the Dasha period is a planetary period, and this tells us like kind of which planets are a little more active or influential at the time. The Dasha period is Ketu, the south node of the moon, moon itself, Mercury, and Rahu, the north node of the moon. So with this, this is, frankly, a little bit of a hot mess. Not even a little bit. It's kind of a hot mess, frankly. Why is that? Because Ketu and Rahu, the north and south and north node of the moon, nodes of the moon, respectively, they on their own can indicate things like suddenness, hiddenness, mental health issues. And we've got in here Moon and Mercury, which are the two planets representing the mind. Moon, the intuitive mind, emotional mind, and Mercury, the rational, logical mind. So, and the thing is that the moon is new, so the moon is very weak. And the thing is, Ketu and Rahu are in this chart are in the 6th house and the 12th house. So those are dushtanas, those are houses of suffering. And Mercury is not particularly strong. Mercury is in an enemy house in the 4th house here. It's in Cancer, which is ruled by the moon, and the moon is not strong. And Mercury happens to be in a part of the sky, a nakshatra called a shlesha. A shlesha is the symbol of that is a snake. So that can be like a mesmerizing type energy. It has snake-like energy. Some snakes run and hide. Some snakes hiss and bite. But especially when we have the Mercury here, this could be words that bite or sting, or sometimes again, the snake symbol that's used sometimes in medicine. So this could be like uh, medical support for Mercury-related things. So like the nervous system, speech, communication, decisions, that sort of thing. Yeah. And especially since we have Moon with Sun here, Sun is Swan in its own sign in the 5th house. The 5th house also represents counseling. So maybe somebody would be benefited by getting some, mental emotional counseling, or how do we lead ourselves, mentally emotionally through times of loss, because definitely Rahu and Ketu are indicating loss and disruptions and delays and that sort of thing. Okay. We've got a bunch of yogas here. These are planetary combinations. So we've got a Suboyachari video, sorry, yoga. So we've got benefics on either side of the sun. So that should help the sun quite a bit, but we're not running the sun. We also have Dura Dura yoga. That's a solar yoga. Because what do we have here? Oh, the moon also is supported by the flanking of the Mercury and Venus. So that'll help the moon a little bit, but I mean the moon is new, so it's pretty much toast. Then the Kalasarpa yoga, that's almost all the planets on one side of the Rahu Ketu axis, the other. And Saturn's on one side, but that, as I've mentioned many times, that doesn't bother me. I would still call this the Kalasarpa yoga. So that's going to bring more, kind of unusual activity to the field and also ambition as well. The other thing is that I would say that we have a bala yoga here because we have 4 out of 9 planets in negative houses. So bala yoga can indicate when you read some like a newborn's chart or anybody's chart, is that if they have a bunch of planets in negative houses, that can indicate childhood is quite can be a difficult or even traumatic time, physically, mentally, emotionally, depends on planets and where they're at. But it can mean difficulty in childhood, and sometimes the childhood's so difficult that the child doesn't survive. So, we can already see that there are complications here. Yeah. Um, what else is going on here? And some mental emotional struggle. Uh, you know, we have Sun is Swa. Okay, that's strong. Saturn is Swa, and Saturn is also retrograde, so it's doubly strong. And we got Sun, mutually aspecting Saturn. So that's going to be a power struggle because Sun represents like the president or king, and Saturn represents the proletariat or kind of working class. So they're at odds. And then Mercury is also Swa. Why is that Swa? Oh, it's not Swa because it's in its own sign, but it's Swa because it's in its own star, Tara. Because Ashleisha, the lunar mansion where Mercury sits, is ruled by Mercury, so Mercury is in its own star. So all 3 of those planets, Sun, Saturn, Mercury, are all strong. So again, we're talking about like leadership here of mind through difficult circumstances. Venus is debilitated, and it's with Ketu, and it's aspected by Jupiter and Mars. So, Venus has 2 malefics on it. Jupiter is helping out a little bit. But Venus is debilitated, and Venus, at least in this chart, is the ruler of the 7th house of independent business, but also relationships and spouse-like partner. And Venus is the karaka or planet symbol of spouse or spouse-like partner. and other relationships. So, again, not it's a struggle. It's a bit of a struggle right now, especially regarding relationships and also possibly women, because Moon and Venus both represent women. Venus is debilitated, Moon is new. And it's really, the moon is really kind of overshadowed, well, like literally overshadowed because it's eclipsed by the sun because it's so close. But, with sun in its own sign, that sun, whatever planet is in this Leo Rashi, which Mercury can see is on its way, is going to be dominated by the sun and also this massive Saturn. So the moon is getting crunched in between this power struggle here, between these two planets. What else? And Mars. Oh, Mars is also problematic. Why is Mars problematic? Well, we have Mars in the third house. So Mars represents siblings, and the third house represents siblings. So when you have Mars in the third house, that gives us what we call a karako nasha. So it's a planet breaking house. So it sounds kind of good that a planet representing siblings is in the house, also representing siblings, but it's almost like there's too much energy here. Yeah, so this can be not necessarily between, like if this was a person's chart between the native and the sibling, it could just be the siblings generally have trouble on their own. Like maybe there's a good relationship here, but it's just the sibling is having, I don't know, health issues or financial issues or whatever. Um, what else does this Mars is like pretty massive though. It's Karko Bhavanasha. It's also Swa because it's in its own star, like Mercury is, so that makes Mars strong. It's also Bhavam. So, and this is also problematic because what is a Bhavam? Well, in this particular case with Mars, Mars is the ruler of the eighth house, which indicates, a lot of people think eighth house is like kind of like the worst of the worst. Because this is a house that indicates like long-term struggles and chronic issues and deep, long, problems and stuff like that. So the Lord of that house is gone eight houses away. So the eighth Lord is gone eight houses away. So what that means is in the category of siblings, because that's what we're looking at the third house and the karaka of Mars, um, this is going to be like, it's almost like the siblings, or this could also be neighbors. It's like one long hardship after another, is what you could see there. Okay, so sibling could be in trouble, maybe neighbor. But the thing is, Mars also represents courage, and the third house also represents courage. So it could be like seeking strength or courage to deal with clearly all these problems. Like the siblings is compromised, Moon is compromised, Mercury's not super strong. It will be compromised in a day or two once it moves into Leo. Venus is compromised. Like there aren't too many soft spots to land in this chart. Okay. So that's how we're starting September. So this is, it's an eclipse season, and we've got a lot of intense lineups besides the eclipses. So it's going to be kind of an intense month. But, again, that's why, not the theme, but again, the advice for the month is ride the waves. I mean, rather than brace yourself, maybe it's good to be a little flexible, a little flowy, to so you don't get shattered, that sort of thing. And again, I don't want to use too strong a language and that sort of thing and scare people, not by any means. But there are probably going to be some intense moments for quite a few people this month. So, all right, then the second chart we have September 30th. Again, Aries, Mesha, Lugna, rising chart. So it's a natural zodiac. The moon at this point is in Purva Falguni, and the sun has moved on. So, the sun was actually energizing the moon because you can see the moon is going to be new again in a couple days here once it catches up to the sun, but now the sun's in Virgo. Um, but what do we got going on? The moon is in Purva Falguni. Purva Falguni is a nakshatra symbolized by a hammock. So it's like, about easy times, relaxed times, luxury goods, finer things of life, entertainment, socializing, that's, kind of fun and easy times. But we have this massive Saturn, Swa in its own sign of Aquarius, retrograde, so double primary strength. And Saturn represents things like delays, obstacles, chronic disease, even death sometimes, okay? And that is on the moon. So, you know, and the moon can represent things like mother, but it can also represent, again, emotions and the intuitive mind, that sort of thing. So it's almost like the end of good, easy times. The Jasha period in the second chart is Venus, Mercury, Venus, Venus. Okay, so we're all about Venus, and Venus is, again, the planet that represents spouse-like partnerships, also minor things of life. So luxury goods, refined food, pets, travel, money, wealth, beauty, arts, kind of the extra stuff. Venus is not about like, necessary basics. It's like it's always extra, that's Venus. Um, Now the thing is, Venus has moved out of debilitation because it's not in Virgo anymore by the end of the month, and it's moved into uh, what is it, Libra or Tula, which is in its own sign, so it's Swa. So Venus should be strong, and it is strong. However, for the Aries Lugna, Venus also now creates a karako bhava. It's just like Mars represents siblings, and it's a house representing siblings in the third house. Venus represents spouse, and it's in the house representing spouse, so the seventh house. So not only do we have issues with siblings, or they have issues, but the spouse is also kind of same, yeah, issues with spouse. So again, Mars sibling compromise, Venus compromised, Moon compromised because this massive Saturn is on it. What else is compromised? Um, Sun is getting, is now the Sun was dominating a lot of planets when it was in its own sign. Now the Sun is switching, where the Sun is now dominated by Mercury because Mercury's in its own sign of Virgo. Yeah. So, what else? Mm, what else? Okay, so similar. So the chart, like the yogas, a lot of them are the same. However, the kala sarpa is now broken. So because now we have what, three planets on one side of the Rahu Ketu axis and four on the other. So no more kala sarpa. So things will be a little less hidden. However, we're going to get more specifically Ketu influence because since Ketu is with its dispositor, the owner of its sign Mercury, you can take 5-9 aspects from Ketu. So Ketu, by the end of the month, is going to aspect the other Earth signs of Taurus. So in this chart, the second house, and also Capricorn is chart the 10th house. So Ketu will be influencing all of the Earth signs. And Ketu is a erratic planet. It's an explosive planet. It's a separatist planet. All those sorts of things. And it can be explosive when we're talking about earth signs. So it might be like material things, ending or changing or blowing up. Literally, could be. Um, the sign in which it sits, Virgo, might be more protected because Mercury, the ruler of Virgo, is in its own sign. So that'll protect inanimate things, but it won't protect people. So, like, Mercury represents friends. So, K2 is there, which can be like a dissolution of a friendship. It could also be like a business partner, that sort of thing. But the other thing is that Mars is aspecting Virgo, and Mars is also similar to K2. K2 is like an even they're similar energies. Mars and K2 are similar, except K2 is even more kind of hidden, unexpected, blue moon, like where did this come from? Sun shocking things. So you have those two planets with the sun. So Mars and Sun are there with Mercury. So Mars and Sun are the two leadership planets. So this is like a shift of hands. This could be like also an ending of contracts and stuff like that because Jupiter is also aspecting here. When you get Mars and Jupiter and Mercury together, all those together, it can be like a legal contracts and stuff like that. It could also be technology because you have Mercury, K2, and Mars there. When you get Mercury and Mars together, you can get computers, and K2 is technology. So, you know, all kinds of disruptions depending on what planets somebody's running. Okay. The other thing is K2 and Mercury can be quite detached for different reasons. K2 is just sort of like can be a scorch the earth type of energy. And then Mercury is more of like a mental attachment. So, uh, so Venus, karako, bhava, nashaya, partner troubles. Venus, not Sun, Saturn. Oh, Sun is no longer swa. I don't know. I wrote Saturn there. Saturn is still swa because it's in its own sign, but the thing is, I think it is. Let me see, Mercury, Saturn. No, it's not that. I was gonna say maybe it's in its own star, so I think that was a mistake. So Venus is swa, but not the sun anymore. The other thing is that again, the end of the month, September 30th, is in what we call the eclipse tunnel. So the eclipse tunnel is the time in between, because usually eclipses come in pairs, sometimes in threes, and so the time in between the two eclipses is 2 weeks. We call that the eclipse tunnel, and so it's just again, if you watch my video on eclipses from a Vedic astrology perspective, is the only thing you can absolutely say about eclipses is that it's like expect the unexpected. And that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it can be like you realize your expectations are quite negative and something like unexpectedly good happened. You're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be so so negative about this thing or be more optimistic or, consider other options or something like that. So yeah. So you can see that even though there's challenge in the beginning, I would say it's even more challenging towards the end here. And especially like um, mentally, emotionally, I would say quite tough with this massive Saturn on the moon, and then Mercury. Even though Mercury is swa, you've got it with what Sun, K2, Mars, three malefics, and like a little bit of a lift from Jupiter. So there you go. All right, let's talk about some of the planets, what they're doing. We'll follow them. And then, again, I like to include different famous birth charts during my monthly video here. So you can see how these energies are manifesting in a more concrete way rather than it just being so abstract. All right, so the moon in September, and if you don't follow me, I do separate videos on the new and full moon. There's going to be a new moon tomorrow, and I'm still doing this one. So hopefully I can like get that out, in a reasonable, pretty quick time, so you guys have something for tomorrow. But so September 2nd, there's a new moon or Amavasya in Leo or Simha, and it's in Purva Falguni. So Leo is a friend sign to the moon, so that helps the moon a bit. It's also a fixed fire sign. This is going to be like active, very active. Fixed actions here. It will be with a swa sun, so a very strong sun. The sun will influence greatly the moon, so there might be a lot of mental activity or emotional activity right now. It's also aspected by that swa Saturn, so it's like again this push pull, energy with the moon, getting stuck in the middle and between fixed thoughts and fixed actions. Because the sun is fixed in its fixed action sign and Saturn's in a fixed thought sign. So this could be again like, shifting paradigms in a way. Like, how do I move through this tough time? When you could literally even say like rock and a hard place. Like what do I do? When there doesn't seem to be any easy options, for improving things. Yeah. Then September 18th, there's a lunar eclipse, chandra grahan in Pisces Mina in the nakshatra Purva Bhadrapada. Again, see my video on lunar and solar eclipses, chandra, surya, grahans for general Vedic astrology perspective on, eclipses if you're new to that. But Pisces is a dual water sign, so Dvusva Bhavajal, so we're gonna have mixed emotions here, especially since the moon represents emotions. And also Venus. So this is going to be like a lot. Most planets are involved here. I think the only two planets not involved with this. I think the only planet not involved is like Saturn in this upcoming lunar eclipse. So Venus will be debilitated in Virgo or Kanya, but it will be exalted in Pisces, where this lunar eclipse is happening. So that'll be nice. And it'll be with Rahu. And then you'll have Sun with Venus in Virgo. Sun is not particularly strong. It's going to be kind of, how would I say, um, not as strong as it has been. So if you felt like in the last month or so, while sun was in its own sign, that like you kind of got some extra energy or started moving on some things that were kind of stuck, um, it might slow down again. The other thing is that when Sun is in Virgo for I think a week or two, Mercury will still be in Leo, and there'll be a parivartana exchange of houses between Sun and Mercury. So you can basically think of Mercury being in that house as well, providing some protection. But again, when a planet is in its own house, it can protect inanimate items, but not necessarily people or relationships. So, because you have Mercury there and Venus there, Venus can be loved ones, and Mercury can be like friends or coworkers, that kind of relationship, business partners. And then Moon is like mom and also emotions and stuff like that. And we're on the Rahu Ketu axis of, potentially like mental health again. It looks like there's going to be some mental emotional issues related to changes in, relationships here, is what I'm saying, as a first pass at this, lunar eclipse. On October 2nd, a solar eclipse, Surya Grahan and Virgo Kanya Hasta. So the moon is in a friend sign in Virgo. It's a dual earth sign to Vava Prithvi. So there's going to be kind of a contrasting but practical nature of what happens here. This eclipse, the moon is going to be conjoined by a swell Mercury, Sun, K2, and aspected by Mars and Jupiter. So all of this together, again, as a first pass analysis, is like attempting to find grounded solutions, grabbing or releasing control, physical, mental, emotional, on all those levels, things. Again, protection of inanimate items, but not people and relationships. So again, um, there might be a big switcheroo here in terms of like friendships and alliances and relationships. That's what it seems like these eclipses are bringing. But again, I'll have separate videos on these events so you can really get in a lot of detail. Then Mercury, the other mind planet here, or Buddha. Mercury is always active because it's a fast-moving planet. So September 4th, Mercury enters Leo or Simha, Maga, also Maga Nakshatra simultaneously. Leo is a friend sign to Mercury, so it'll support Mercury a bit. It's a fixed fire sign, so again, a lot of constant action here. And Mercury represents things like words and decisions and stuff like that. So, but also actions because of the Leo. So this could be like leading, because we're talking about Maga again, leadership nakshatra, leading with new words and actions, leading, especially because the swa Saturn is opposing all this. So there's going to be a tension between actions and thoughts again. So there might also be confusion because when you have these two massive influences and opposite influences in many ways on Mercury, and Mercury is about, making decisions, it might be like, again, which way do I go? September 13th, Mercury enters Purva Falguni Nakshatra. So that might be a little bit lighter for Mercury. You might be like enjoying an upgrade or some newfound purpose because Sun will still be there in its own sign. September 14th, Mercury goes combust, so it'll be so close to the sun you can't see it anymore. This is called asta in Sanskrit. So the outer manifestations of Mercury will not be seen as much. So friends, travel, technology, that sort of thing, communication. But the more internal aspects of Mercury will be stronger. So reflecting, deciding, planning. So again, going internal here. September 18th, Saturn has an exact aspect on Mercury. And that's the same day-ish with it. Yeah, the same day as the lunar eclipse coming up. So again, that seems like pretty strong in addition, even though the eclipse, the moon is not eclipsed in Virgo, there's still going to be a strong influence of an ending here. So this could be a mental setback as well. Um, oh wait, let me step back. Let me step back. Mercury will still be in Leo, but the thing is that there's a parivartana going on between Mercury and Sun. So, sorry, there will still be like a loss or ending of friend or business. I think I was already thinking Mercury had moved into Virgo, but it hasn't yet because we haven't gotten to it yet. So, but you could see this as being with this massive Saturn on Mercury, like a mental setback to moving forward. Because again, there's all this fire, fueling Mercury, making decisions, talking fast, moving fast, deciding fast. But the Saturn is like going to be a disruption here, a setback, I'd see. You can also see this as like a lot of bureaucracy. So, Mercury's all about details and words and contracts and stuff like this. So it could just be like a lot of paperwork that has to be done, all this Saturn, delays and obstacles and stuff like that. But again, losses with friendship, business related stuff. September 21st, Mercury enters Uttara Falguni Nakshatra. So again, a little bit of a lighter enjoyment energy here because Uttara Falguni is also symbolized by a hammock. But Uttara Falguni is different in that it's like enjoyment with a sense of purpose. So it might be like a little bit of like, loosening up or feeling like there was no mental break or something like that. But now it's sort of like, okay, let's try to move in a better direction, but with also a sense of purpose, like not just sort of flit around and. So September 23rd, Mercury enters Virgo or Kanya then. It will be swa, it will be strong. And with Mercury in Virgo, again, a dual earth sign. This is going to be about cleaning, and you might see yourself like wanting to clean and organize everything, going on a spree. That's very much Mercury in Virgo. I did an analysis of Marie Kondo, this Japanese woman who I don't know if she is so much anymore, but the last few years was like super famous in the United States because she was helping everybody like organize their house and their sock drawer and all this kind of stuff. And she has Mercury in Virgo, which again is not very surprising. The other thing is that Mercury in its own sign, whether it's Gemini or Virgo, usually what I see when I see somebody's chart who has Mercury in its own sign is somebody who's interested in meditation and or Buddhism. Because again, Buddhism and meditation are very much about, have a very strong mental discipline associated with them. And so since Mercury is, like a decision to go within and cleanse the mind, there you go. Okay. Then September 28th, Mercury enters Hasta Nakshatra. So Hasta is symbolized by hand. So literally this could be grabbing things, especially because Mercury itself represents like the hand and the arm and the shoulder. So it could be literally grabbing and releasing control of things because Sun will be there by then and K2's there. And I think they might all be, I think Sun, Mercury, and K2 are all going to be in Hasta at the same time. And it's very close to the eclipse times and stuff like that. So, and because Virgo is a dual sign, it will be grabbing something and keeping it or grabbing something and tossing it. So there's going to be this like sorting activity of what stays and what goes. Yeah. And you might be surprised because the eclipses are involved here. You might be surprised at what stays and what goes, especially regarding relationships. Okay, then the 29th of September, Mercury crosses K2. So again, disruption in plans, friends, business, unusual decisions, communication, education, potentially, because Mercury can represent education as well. So yeah, Mercury is going to be pretty busy, but luckily it's in Virgo towards the end of the month to provide some protection for that second eclipse coming up. Okay, so here's the first famous birth chart that I looked at for this month. This is the birth chart for Mount Vesuvius erupting. Well, actually, the day before. So for some reason, I don't know if it was a typo in my software, I had input the date as the 23rd of August, 79 AD for Mount Vesuvius. So Mount Vesuvius is this big volcano in south of Italy. And it erupted in 79 AD and very close to two towns, Pompeii and Herculaneum, I think the other one is called. And Pompeii is a big tourist destination spot because of this volcano eruption that happened, what, 2,000 years ago? Almost 2,000 years ago. No, okay, no, almost 2,000 years ago. So, anyway, in my software is for some reason it was 23rd of August. The actual date is the 24th of August. But I was like, well, should I go back? Because I'd already done the analysis. I was like, oh, I should go back and change it. And just, it hadn't changed that much, but it changed in subtle ways that I think are significant. And I actually thought that this is really great here. So anyway, so I decided to stick with this. So the actual date of the eruption is the 24th of August. So keep that in mind. Um, so there is an exact time of 1 p.m. And that's kind of wild that we have that. And it's also kind of wild because what happened is there was this young man, teenager, I think he was 15 years old. His name was Pliny the Younger. He was writing his uncle, Pliny the Elder, a letter, just, I guess, describing his day or time or whatever. And at 1 o'clock is when on the 24th of August, is when the first ash was falling in the town where he lived, which is a few miles away from this volcano that erupted. Okay. And his letter is the only written record that survived all of this, eruption. Because they had like rocks falling from the sky and ash falling from the sky where it would like just covered people like a snowstorm, and then there are all these gases that suffocated people. It was like a crazy time. So anyway, we happen to have this young man's letter that survived, and so that's how we know when the day and then the approximate time. So this chart again is set for 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but the day before the actual eruption. But as you'll see, I mean, this is like, I don't know, maybe it wasn't actually an accident, but I ended up on this day. So let's go through it and then we'll talk about it. So the Lagna Nakshatra is in Mula. Already there, that says a lot. So Mula is represented by a bunch of roots tied together. And the deity associated with Mula Nakshatra is Nriti, which is a form of Kali, the goddess of destruction and death. Okay, so we're starting off there. Okay, as an overriding energy. Okay. Now, when we move to the only planet that shifts nakshatras between the 23rd of August and the 24th is the moon, because the moon moves so fast. But on this day, the 23rd, moon is also in Mula, so we double up on that. It's like a precursor foreshadowing. It's like the trailer, the spooky trailer before you see the whole movie type thing. Okay. And so the moon is also in Mula. So again, more of this death, destruction, and moon represents again the mind, emotions, the public, and all of that happened. I mean, people didn't know, like literally the sky was falling, you know. They probably thought it was like the end of the world, could very well have been. It almost was. Well, for some of them it was, I guess. Then, but the moon on the 24th is going to be in Purvashada. So the Purvashada energy is a winnowing basket. So that's about like, taking some wheat and shuffling it across a basket to separate the inedible parts, the hard parts with the more nutritious parts, that you can eat. And that's what everybody was doing. Everybody was shuffling the next day, trying to figure out what to do and where to go and all this kind of stuff. Okay. So, so this is like, again, the, dark, ominous precursor moment. And then the people got involved because, again, all of this was actually happening because in addition to the volcano erupting, there were minor earthquakes leading up to this. So you could even see this as like leading up to the eruption. And then also on the day of the eruption, apparently there was a tsunami as well. So apparently it wasn't just the earth was like cracking and crumbling and tossing up soot and ash and, rocks and stuff, fire and lava. But the other thing is that the sky was coming down, with some sort of storm, and then the seas were churning. And apparently, part of the reason why the volcano erupted was that there was some like seawater had gotten into a crack between the tectonic plates or something where it touched the molten lava, and then that just like the vaporizing of the seawater just I don't know. Again, I'm not an expert, but I was like, wow, it just there was a lot going on here. Okay, from the sky, from the earth, it was just a crazy, crazy time. And again, when we look at the chart, you can see why. All right, so the sun, sort of ironically, or surprisingly, perhaps it was a surprise to me. Sun is in the nakshatra of Uttar Falguni. So again, an enjoyment, energy here, enjoyment with purpose. So it is with Mercury in its own sign of Virgo here. So kind of like what we're going to experience in a few weeks. And that's part of why I picked the chart, this chart. But Mercury in its own sign, that's going to be a lot of communication, a lot of writing, which is what happened here. Is we got a letter out of this, right? The sun is also like purpose. And so this young man um, it was sort of like again, if we modernize this young man, because his energy is part of this. This is like a budding influencer, blogger type, journalist type person. Because you have Mercury again in its own sign with Sun, and that's in the 10th house of day to day, 9 to 5 jobs and stuff like that. The other thing is you have Moon, which is like public, right. Opposite to Jupiter, which is oral communication, publications. So this is like informing the public. So in that particular moment, he was writing a letter, but his letter survived, about 2,000 years and is informing us as to the history here. So all of that, is the same. Okay. So, and then so he was enjoying, clearly he was just, liking the writing process, but there also happened to be a purpose in terms of, informing history. Okay. So, and then the moon nakshatra, again, mula, more death and destruction energy. Then the day lord was moon, hello, and the hora lord was moon, hello. So we've got 4 already, besides the sun and Uttar Falguni, which again is just like, whoa, that's like a lark. Um, you can see it coming. I mean, mula, 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 all over the place. Death and destruction is just like, wow. Then the Burtisha, as if there's not enough, you have K2, Moon, Saturn, Saturn. Okay, so you have Moon again. So you've got 4, 1, 2, 3, 5 mulas already. And again, Moon represents the public. K2 is, okay, now K2 and Saturn are also problematic. So okay, K2 and Mars are in the 5th house here. You can see they're in the red circle. You can also see they're within a couple degrees of each other. Mars just crossed K2. Okay. They're within basically the same degree. Now, the thing is, we don't have Mars crossing K2, but I haven't talked about Mars yet, but Mars is going to aspect K2 directly in the same degree this month. Okay. Now, Mars is an erratic planet. It's rebellious, it's fiery, it's violent. K2 is similar, but even more, ratchet up a notch or two, also more hidden, unexpected, destructive. Now, when you get these two together, that can, like literally the earth can split, like this happened here. Okay. Because Mars also represents things like land. Okay. Also, when you get Mars and K2 together, because it's so erratic and violent, you can get accidents, you can get injuries, you can get military, like operations, explosion, whatever. You can get all that, okay? So K2 is here, and K2 is with Mars, which is retrograde in its own sign. This is a massive, strong Mars here. And then on top of that, literally on top of that, or aspecting that, you have Saturn in its own sign of Aquarius. So again, you see the similarities with the sky, okay? Now again, don't freak out, okay? Because K2 and Mars are in different signs, like it's different, okay? So don't expect this, like things to blow up like Mount Vesuvius did. But you can see already how this is all lining up where it's like almost any level you look at, you're getting similar energy, okay? So again, if you're learning how to read charts, that's what we do. Okay. So then we have K2, so this erratic planet with which is kind of boosted up with this, really strong Mars. So it's almost like boosting up, K2 because K2 and Rahu reflect the planets around it. They kind of mirror the planets around it or amplify the planets around it. Then you have Saturn, Saturn. So again, Saturn represents things like delays, obstacles, antiquity. It also represents land and property like Mars does. So again, the land is blowing up. Okay. And Saturn is in Aquarius. And is it in Dhanishta? I don't remember what nakshatra it's in, but Saturn from Aquarius is aspecting this Mars K2 mix, and Saturn's debilitated here. So literally, you could see these three together as like a cracking in the earth or something, which essentially it was. But when we look at these symbolically, like K2 is sudden, unexpected. Moon is like fear and emotions and public, and Saturn's like sudden, when we get these planets together, sudden death, public fear. That's essentially everybody just like ran if they could. Some people like the gases just came and like knocked everybody out. Like I was reading about like you can still see casts of people, like they just like fell over and were kind of encased in like this volcanic ash or something like that. I mean, it's just so wild. And so people go to visit. There's like a whole park where people go to like visit these casts of people that were just essentially vaporized, like by the gases and the heat and everything. Some of these people, like it got to, I want to say like 500 degrees Fahrenheit or something like it was an oven essentially. So yeah, but anyway, they were saying that the positioning of the people, you could tell that like it wasn't like a long drawn out struggle, like it was almost instantaneous, process of them passing away. So, because again, maybe thankfully for that, that it happened quick, for physical and mental, emotional reasons. So you can see this is already like a hot mess, very destructive hot mess. So this again recreates the current sky pattern because Saturn is SWA and retrograde in Aquarius. Mars is in this basically same degree of K2. K2, because K2 is with Mars, you get K2 aspecting 5 and 9 houses away. But in this chart, it's aspecting the fire signs, okay? Because the rising sign here is Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a fire sign. So you get this, wild, K2 on a dual fire sign. So it's like, lighting a match and just throwing some gasoline on it. And then Sun and Mercury are in Virgo. So you can see there's a lot of similarity. Now, this other part, this right part of the slide here, I don't usually do this, but I was looking at it and it was like so phenomenally lined up that I was like, I had to share because it was just so wild. Okay. So this is again from the software, and the first column here is the planet. So the ascendant, that's also the lugna, then Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, on down. Okay. Then the nakshatra that they're in. So Mula, we've talked about. Uttar Falguni, Mula, we've talked about. So Ashwini and Ketu are in, Mars and Ketu are in Ashwini nakshatra. Ashwini is all about like rescuing. Yeah, it's like healing, rescuing. So this is like a emergency response, essentially. This Mars, Ketu, Saturn mix in Ashwini is an emergency response. Then Mercury, Uttar Falguni with the Sun. So again, and somebody's just sitting there, and this younger guy, his uncle, maternal uncle, Pliny the Elder, was like head of the local fleet, of the Roman Navy or something. big statesman and like wrote all these books. And he went out to go on a rescue mission and invited this young guy to go with him. And the young guy said no, he's going to stay with his mom. And so and actually his uncle passed away during this, and he's one of the only people that they can identify by name that passed away. Otherwise, it was fairly anonymous because it was like in the area, those two towns, Pompeii and Herculaneum, was like 20,000 people. So I don't know, and they don't know how many people passed, because some of their remains are not don't haven't remained. So 'cause it all just got obliterated. But anyway, so let's get back to this little grid over here or list. So we've had the nakshatras. Then the next one number, don't forget that, you don't need that. But then if you go to the Lord's column here, the first planet, and I've circled them, these are the ruling planets for the nakshatras that these planets are in. Now look, so we've already talked about, we're running K2, Moon, Saturn, okay? Look at how many of these planets and the lugna are in K2, okay, stars of K2. So the lugna is in K2. So this, hyped up, crazy, amped up, you know, Mars retrograde, boosted, Saturn debilitated. I mean, this K2 is wild, wild right now. So the Lugna is in K2 star, Moon is in K2 star, Mars is in K2 star. So, it's like K2 is in Mars' sign with Mars, but then Mars is in, this is like this like amalgamation, this crazy amalgamation here of Mars and K2. And then K2 itself is in its own star. K2 is Swa in K2. I was just like, that is crazy, just that alone. But then get this, and there's more. So then we have Jupiter, Saturn, and Rahu in the star of Rahu. So you have three. So you have one, two, three, four planets or the Lugna in K2, and three more in Rahu. So you can see how much of this north and south node moon. This is like, even though we don't have an eclipse, there's so much like eclipsean energy from the 5-9 aspects of K2. And look at all these planets are in stars of K2 and Rahu. I mean, that's crazy. Then the only other two planets, stars that people are the planets are in are Sun, and Sun is in its own star. So it's strong that way, it's Swa. And Mercury is in the star of Sun. So, and then Venus is in the star of Mercury. So, Sun is in its own star, Rahu's in its own star, Ketu's in its own star. I mean, that's wild. I mean, this is a very rare, lineup here. This is like, you get on the slot machine and they all line up like, yay, win, win, win. Yeah, so, and then if we look at these nakshatras and stars, so taras is the name for stars in Sanskrit. So 4 K2, 3 Rahu, 2 Sun, Mercury. So if we look at this, so purpose, so that's Sun, writing, communication, Mercury, and then unusual events, all this K2 Rahu stuff. And again, K2 Swa, Sun is in its own star, and Rahu's in its own star. So there's even a deeper level of this like craziness going on at the both house level and planet level, then the star level as well, is essentially what's going on. Then if you look at the nakshatras that they're in, so the nakshatras have different kinds of general energies to them. And when you see Mula and Ardra and Ashlesha, so there's Mula times 2, and then because the Lugna's in it, the Moon's in it, and then we have Ardra, we have Jupiter and Ardra, and Ashlesha. What do we have in Ashlesha? Venus and Ashlesha. These four are what we call Dharna Chikshna nakshatras, so ferocious and sharp. Okay, does that give you an idea already? And then Uttar Falguni, we have times 2 because Sun and Mercury in this nakshatra they're Dhruvashtira nakshatra, so fixed and constant. Okay. So, again, this guy was just, going about his day, writing his uncle a letter, and then it started falling from the sky, and then it all went to crap from there, pretty much. Then Ashwini, again, that rescuing energy. Ashwini nakshatra is a Lagu Kshipra energy with a short dynamic. So it's like fast and quick kind of energy, which you would hope would happen with a rescue operation. And there's Shatabisha and Swati, and these are Charchala nakshatras. So the energy here is movable, right? So what's in Charchala? So Rahu is in Charchala, and Saturn as well. Okay. So you can see, like, none of this, like, there are other nakshatras that are mridu, which are like sweet and gentle, like Mrigashirsha or, Chitra or Revati. There, none of those. I mean, you see the planets and the stars and nakshatras you're running, and you're just like, yeah, not a surprise here. Okay. So anyway, let me go on to the next slide where I'm gonna do the rest of the analysis I normally do. But again, I just saw this and I thought, well, some of you hardcore Jyotishis out there will be interested in that. So there you go. Okay, so here's more on Mount Vesuvius. The stuff on the left is all the same, and then I've got notes on the houses that I'll go through. So the Lugna here, rising sign is Sagittarius or Danu, dual fire signs, Osma Baba Agni, so dual, contrary actions, which that's the earth underneath where things are moving in different directions, water and heat and gases, it's just floating. And then the next day again, the people running back and forth trying to save themselves. So we have the moon, and then aspected by Ketu, and then it's also aspected by Jupiter. So sudden unusual death, separation, fear, sadness, because Jupiter is in Ardra nakshatra. So Ardra is symbolized by a teardrop. There'll be a lot of sadness, but it's also a stormy, um, uh, you know, literally like it could be like a storm cloud, like electricity. And Jupiter is a planet that represents the sky. So not only was the Earth cracking and blowing up, but then the sky was also coming down. So it's just crazy to have that all happening at the same time. But again, this is a dual sign, so we've got dual fire, dual actions. Like it's not, like that's why you're getting sandwiched in between the Earth and the sky here. Yeah. Um, the other thing is that the lugna is Gandanta. So, meaning that you can see the lugna is about a degree 30, so almost the first degree. I usually take it, 2 degrees in the first or last part of a constellation. That's always going to be unstable. Usually we call it Sunday. The thing is, when you get to the transition, and Sunday is always going to be like the transition from one constellation to the next because you're always moving from one element to the next. So while the planet's shifting, it's going to be unstable. But particularly unstable are the Gandanta points, and the Gandanta points in the chart or the sky are where you go from a fire sign, from a water sign to a fire sign. Because at those junction points, you're not only shifting constellations, but you're shifting nakshatras. So you're double shifting here. Which again, you're double shifting in this moment in time. Okay. So very, even more unstable this moment in time. There is some preservation, though, some protection because you have Jupiter aspecting into its own sign. So that's why you have a park. There's like a whole national park here, of these castes or whatever. I think there's some property that remains, and then also the castes of the people who, passed away. So it's kind of a weird, as much destruction as there was, it's like 2,000 years later, there's like a park where people come to visit from around the world. I mean, it's kind of a wild thing. Um, but again, with this dual action, dual fire sign of Sagittarius, it's like not knowing what to do, not knowing which way to go. Once the people catch on to what's coming here, and in the next day, the Lugnaceous Jupiter, it's gone to a Kamasthana in the 7th house, so there's enjoyment here. And again, that's a little bit weird, when you first think about it, because it's like enjoyment of all this destruction from the sky and the earth. But I think that this person and most people were, like he wrote in his letter, apparently the morning was just very normal and happy. And the other thing is that back in the day, not just now, people come from all over the world to visit this place because of this, kind of bizarre history here, and bizarre event that happened. But even back then, rich Romans used to come to this place and, enjoy the seaside and stuff like that. So it's just like this weird mix of enjoyment, but destruction. What else? So the yogas here, there's a Bhadra yoga, that's Mercury in its own sign, so it's going to be very strong Mercury. So writing, communication, which his letter survived 2,000 years, which is amazing. There's a budhaditya yoga here, so that's intelligence. And actually, when I was reading a little bit of the guy's letter, he's very like technical. I mean, you could tell he's young because it's almost like he doesn't know what details to focus on, so he just included all the details. But he's very like technical and precise in detail, which you would assume with this Mercury in its own sign, because that's what Mercury represents: detail orientation and kind of more of a technical aspect of things. There's also a Kesari yoga here with this moon aspecting, mutually aspecting the Jupiter. So that's going to be, networking, both then and now, like, people, getting the word out to protect, you know, themselves and other people, right, to get out of there. So you put this all together, we've got intelligence, writing, recording life, public news, spreading, protection of inanimate items, which I mentioned. The second house lord is a Swa retrograde, bhavat, bhavam, Saturn. So Saturn retrograde in its own sign, very strong, but the bhavat, bhavam. So the second house represents oral communication, and the third house represents neighbors. So this is literally like the grapevine, like, neighbors, one neighbor telling the next, like, "Hey, get out of town. This world, the lava and rocks and everything, gas is coming." Um, and then Saturn, all of this in the second house is aspected by Venus and Inflatia. So Venus can represent loved ones, which I think it mostly does. Venus is in Inflatia, so again, that's snake energy. So this could be like a mesmerizing event, and clearly this guy was mesmerized because he's like watching and recording it as much as he could. Although he apparently, there was so much ash that came down, he had to keep shaking it off. And then apparently he and his mom took off, and his mom was sick or something. She couldn't get very far. She advised him to go on by himself, but he didn't. And then I think at least I think they both survived, but when they came back, their house was like uninhabitable. So this could be like again, the grapevine, people telling their neighbors and spreading the word about people dying, also loss of property and assets I would see here. The third house, the Saturn, massive Saturn, long-term record of difficulties. I mean, this letter survived almost 2,000 years. Fourth house lord is Jupiter. It's aspected by Swa, Mercury, and Sun. So this is like a writing about the legacy of the daily life and disruption going on here. Fifth house lord is Swa, Mars conjoined with K2 aspected by a debilitated Saturn. Again, this is like a crazy. So unusual destruction of earth and property and rescuing efforts, again, fire sign here. Um, the sixth house lord is Venus, and it's gone to the eighth house. This is so you could see it's because the sixth house is acute issues and the eighth house is long-term issues, possibly death and destruction, bankruptcy and stuff. So the Venus is gone, so the acute issues are becoming chronic. The other thing is that the eighth house is represents maternal uncles and aunts. So, um, as I said, his maternal uncle, was Pliny the Elder, the statesman who was a commander for the fleet, naval fleet, Roman naval fleet, and then also an author and all that kind of stuff. His uncle went on a rescue mission and ended up dying in the process. So that's also like a more specific indication for the author of the letter that his maternal uncle passed away. Seventh house lord is a Swan Mercury. Jupiter and Ardor is there, aspected by the moon. So prolific speaking, writing, media. So again, I would see this again, if this was like somebody born in the last 20 years, I would say this person's going to be a writer, blogger, journalist type person. Besides all the communication, just getting the word out, trying to save themselves and other people. Eighth house, lord is moon, which we know is in Mula. And Venus, they're very emotional time about public losses of all kinds. Ninth house lord is Sun. Sun is, Sunday. It's in the first degree, so not a stable government or authority, and aspected by Saturn and KT. So basically, there's like no authority, like there's not much the authority can do, or authority being completely ineffective here, because it just, you know, everything just went so fast. So, and then the 10th house lord is a Swan, Mercury with Sun. So again, professional writer, detailed practical analysis. 11th house lord is Venus. Rahu's there with in Swati nakshatra. So this I would see. So 11th house is like income, but it's also like group. So Rahu is like again fear, mental health issues. Everybody's like scared, ambitious, like trying to save themselves, trying to save whatever. But it's a fragile effort because Swati is symbolized by new grown grass blowing in the wind. So it's like a fragile, if not futile, effort to rescue others with many losses incurred, I would say. Especially because the Lord of the 11th house has gone to the 8th house. So there's going to be losses there. Yeah. Ending of groups and clubs and people there again. Then the 12th house Lord is Mars. It's aspecting its own. So, and then Saturn is aspecting here as well. So there's a loss of land and property, but there's also some salvaging of it. I mean, that's like the weird thing is as much destruction has happened, like you got this new formation of these casts of people and stuff like that that people go to visit, you know. Um, so it's like this weird, kind of bizarre change of it was a destination spot back then and it still is, but for kind of different for different reasons, I guess. So yeah, anyway, I was reading about some of the you know, uh like the extent, because I've just known, I mean, I've just heard that this, volcano blew up, but I've never been there myself. I don't know any details, but it was interesting. Like, apparently there was 100,000 times more thermal energy from this volcano explosion than the nuclear bombs dropped in Japan. When I read that, I was like, that's crazy. I mean, it's like, I was like, wow. And then there were minor earthquakes leading up and a tsunami. So that also like blew me away because I was like, oh, it wasn't just a volcano exploding. It was like there was a tsunami too, and there were earthquakes too. Like it was like three, natural disasters happening simultaneously. That was like I was like, wow, okay, that's crazy. And then the fact that this one record survived, and it was a normal morning. And I mentioned the uncle died on a rescue mission. So yeah, just a very, again, very bizarre time. But when you see the influence of K2, especially K2 in this chart, which again, we're going to see a bit of that, coming up. Again, in a different placement, and Jupiter is not an ardor this time. It's actually in Mrigashirsha, which is a gentle. So it's not going to be the same, but again, there's going to be shifts and changes going on. So again, ride the wave as best you can. It's all any of us can really do, right? So anyway, that's Mount Vesuvius. All right, then Venus, Shukra transits in September. So September 4th, Venus crosses K2. That's going to be destabilizing. It's going to be in Virgo or Kanya, where Virgo is debilitated, although it is a friend sign. So yeah, Venus is going to be compromised. So that also means, spouse-like partners and things, relationships, socializing generally is not going to be probably at its best necessarily. The moon is going to be there, and Mars and Jupiter are aspecting there. Yeah, so this is going to be about seeking solutions to difficult practical issues, because Venus is the worldly counselor. So it might be seeking a solution. I don't know about finding a solution. The two emotional planets, Venus and Moon, are there. So I would see this being like emotional upset, unexpected events with regards to relationships. This could also be something related to online relationships or dating, um, because of the K2 technology piece. The other thing I mentioned in my talks is when I see Venus with K2 or Rahu, I often find that combination in people who are like LGBTQIA, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, whichever, like, who are considered, again, not in a negative way, but just considered a little bit alternative in terms of, um, their sexuality or relationship preferences or whatever. So there might be like something related to that. The only thing though is that Mars by that time, Jupiter won't be in Ardra, but Mars will be. So we're still getting that kind of electric storm sadness energy coming through, but by way of Mars instead of Jupiter. So again, expecting disruptions with the things that Venus represents: vehicles, travel, pets, all that kind of stuff. September 12th, Venus enters Chitra nakshatra. Chitra is represented by gemstones, so structure, architecture. So this could be like designing new, unusual structure or contract. Yeah, and then September 15th, Jupiter has an exact aspect on Venus. So that'll be a little bit of a spiritual legal uplift to Venus, the challenges Venus is going through. September 18th, Venus enters Libra. So right after the eclipse. So Venus will be part of the eclipse and then jump into Libra, where that'll be nice because Venus will be strong in its own sign there. It's a movable air sign, so it's like there'll be strength and new creative ideas and also advice potentially. It's Venus again is a worldly counselor, so Venus can start to recover because Venus has been challenged. It was in Leo with Sun, um, opposite this massive Saturn. Now it's been debilitated with K2, gone through an eclipse. So it's like, okay, finally Venus is kind of coming back here. So again, because of all this challenge, I would just say, be cautious in terms of, I would say new relationships and stuff like that, because especially with the Venus K2, again, in some circumstances, that can be a great thing, for people who are when you get Venus and K2, it's not only necessarily LGBTQIA type stuff, but it can be somebody like um, a partner who's like foreign, from a different country, or just a partner who's like very different from yourself. It could be like a different financial status or physical status, like health status or something like that. But the thing though about it is that Venus is debilitated, and and then you have Mars on it with Ardra. So that's why it's like, if it was like Venus was in Pisces where it's exalted with Rahu, and then you had Jupiter there with Swan, and I'd be like, hey, it's like sunshine and unicorns, but this I'm like, be careful, just stay alert, go, ride the waves, right? That's what we're talking about. And then so Venus will have a chance to recover towards the end of the month after the first eclipse. September 23rd, Venus enters Swati Nakshatra. So again, fresh start in relationship. So there's something that's been cleared away, and now it's time to like recover like relationships and art and socializing and stuff like that. Then the moon Mongol on September 6th, Mars enters Ardra Nakshatra, as I mentioned. This is in Gemini Muttina. That's an enemy sign for Mars. It doesn't do super great there. It's a dual air sign, so contrasting ideas, a lot of thinking. Not necessarily very clear, but a lot of thinking. So brainstorming, conflicting actions, sadness of siblings and enemies, because again, Mars and Ardra, and Mars represents siblings and enemies. It could also be sharp, sudden attacks. That could be, and that's the thing is, yeah. So then the next, well, let me just finish with Mars, or keep going here, and then I'll swing back to the idea that just popped in my head. So September 16th, Mars. Mars has an exact aspect on K2. Now, again, these are both very explosive energies. And almost at the same time, Sun will enter Virgo. So then not only do you have Mars and Ketu, which are fiery type planets, but then the Sun. And Mars and Sun are the two leadership planets. This could make for a very explosive time. And actually, last October, when Mars crossed K2, that's when we had Israel getting bombed. And then that whole, thing blew up, and it's been going on, for what, almost a year now. And I have a video on that if you ever want to, see another example. I mean, I'm giving you plenty of examples of Mars K2 this month, but if you want another real life one, in real time, you can see that Israel video on my channel if that's interesting to you. But when we have Mars and K2 together, just expect accidents, injuries, and again, they don't have to be major like Mount Vesuvius. I mean, that was like wild. But it might be like, don't do anything, too crazy. Don't do anything too risky. It's like it might be something minor, like maybe you cut yourself in the kitchen or something like that. But still, um, the energy is what the energy is, and the energy's in the sky. So, um, and again, maybe you're not running these planets. Maybe you're running Jupiter, which is in, Mrigashirsha, which is in a gentle nakshatra. You're like, okay. You might be on the sidelines just watching everybody else's, stuff blow up. It could be. Then 29th of September, Mars enters Purnavasu nakshatra, so it'll get out of Ardra, which will be nice because it'll be out of there for the second eclipse on October 2nd. Purnavasu is symbolized by a quiver of arrows. So it's like this box where the arrows sit, like, you kind of fold it on your back and you pull the arrow out and string it up on your bow and shoot it off. So Punarvasu has this energy of like having a home base and going out and coming back, so almost like commuting. So especially with Mars here, there might be some new travel situation of like out and back from home that's happening towards the end of the month here. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So in this famous chart, we have the development of the People's Republic of China. So it has similar sky pattern to what we're experiencing this month. So 1st of October, 1949, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Mao Zedong announced at exactly 3 o'clock in Beijing, China, that People's Republic of China was now established. So this is a chart for that moment in time. And what do we have here? So the Lugna Nakshatra you can see is Uttarashana, which is a piercing victory energy. It's symbolized by an elephant's tusk. The Sun Nakshatra is in Hasta, so again, that hand, and the Sun represents authority, so authority, grabbing, control. The Moon Nakshatra is also in Uttarashana, so again, public victory here. Then we have the Day Lord, which is Saturn, so an ending to things. The Hora Lord, our Lord, is Jupiter, which represents law and philosophy. So the end of law, previous law, philosophy. Because again, we have a whole new government here, a whole new structure for the country. The birth to Shah is Sun, Venus, K2, Venus. Okay, so Sun and K2 here are in the 9th house of government. So Sun is in, what is it? It's in Uttara Falguni, I believe. Let me just double check. That's what I'm looking for it on the slide. Oh no, Mercury and Sun are in Hasta. Sorry, Mercury. So again, and then Mercury's combos, it's so close to the Sun, so this is again the government or leader, king, president type person, grabbing control. And K2 is in Chitra, so there's going to be some unusual. So the leader is taking control, and creating a new unusual structure here. Communist philosophy. So yeah, there was a disruption in government, and then Venus. Initially Venus looks pretty strong. Venus is in its own sign in the 10th house here. And Venus is in a nakshatra called Vishaka, which is like a victory nakshatra, but it's victory at all costs. The other thing is that we have Mars and Saturn, two malefics aspecting Venus. When you have Mars and Saturn together, this can be like a manufacturing type energy. The other thing is Saturn aspecting into Libra, where Venus is exalted. Venus again represents things like luxury goods. It can. So with this, what's kind of again ironic to me is that even though this is an anti-capitalistic government that's being set up here, as a whole, what they're creating is this huge capitalist enterprise where this is going to be a very wealthy nation that depends on the manufacturing of luxury goods, which it itself eschews, like kind of rejects, but it's happy to produce all this stuff for anybody else to consume. So it's just sort of, I thought that was kind of funny. But in any case, so the Bertisha here, yeah, I mentioned the Bertisha. Okay, so how does this recreate this current sky pattern? Well, you have K2 with its disposer, Mercury, so you're going to get 5-9 aspects of K2 again. Saturn is not in Aquarius, sitting in Aquarius, but it aspects Aquarius, so you get that again. Sun, Mercury, K2, and Virgo, we're going to get that by the end of the month. Venus is in Libra, we're going to get that by the end of the month. And look at how close Sun is to K2. You know, it's within, what is this, 10 degrees, 9, 10 degrees. That means we're coming up close to an eclipse, and you can see the moon. So when I looked it up, there is going to be a lunar eclipse happening on October 7th of this year. So there's a lot of similarities between the development of People's Republic of China and the current sky pattern. So while Mount Vesuvius was a disruption, a natural disaster eruption, this one is a disruption of government and leadership. Yeah. Okay. So let's go through the houses. The lugna here is Capricorn or Makara. That's a movable earth sign. Chara, Prithvi. Very practical. Capricorn's all about building, building, building. Kind of a workaholic energy, typically. And in this case, I would say very much a workaholic energy because we have Mars, even though it's debilitated in the 7th house where it sits, it's aspecting Capricorn, which is exalted. So this is going to be a practical military, enterprise here. Let's see. So the moon is in the lugna. So again, this is all about the public here, and they call it the People's Republic of China. So this is going to affect the public at large. And we have an exalted Mars coming from the 7th house. Mars is in Ashlesha. So again, that's snake energy. And Mars is debilitated here. And Mars is usually a not only erratic planet, but a violent planet, strong planet. I mean, this is like a snake bite energy. This is not a snake that's going to slink away, I don't think. This is a snake that's going to fight. So, and the thing is, what we have here, Mars, this debilitated Mars and Ashlesha is in the 7th house of relationships and independent business. So, once this change happened in China, there was a big shift in the alliances of the country. And some of them, the more, because Moon is aspecting Cancer here in the 7th house. So it got closer to other communist countries, but, other capitalist countries, it created a greater divide. And also you have K2 aspecting into here as well. So K2 with Moon and Mars and the Lugna here. This is a very, and again, if we're looking at just Mao Zedong, because he's the one, this is his moment, this three o'clock moment. Very chaotic, destructive mind of this person. But, again, successful. Because the moon is an Uttarashada, so he's successful with this, thing here. So sudden public military strike control, practical energy building, usual structure. Yeah, so all that's there. The lignation Saturn. Saturn, this is kind of weird. Initially, I thought this was weird. Saturn is in Porta Falguni, which is again that hammock energy of like enjoyment, finer things of life. And I was like, okay. But Saturn is there. So Saturn is going to suppress that. it's going to be about, making sure everybody's got, their quota of milk and their quota of gas and their whatever. It's going to be parceling things out. It's not like, some people are whatever living on the street and other people are living, in these. I mean, not as much, right? It's going to level things a little bit more. I mean, there is some variation, obviously, but not like, it's like survival of the fittest, right? I mean, that's kind of opposite to communist thought. So, but the thing is, Saturn has gone to the eighth house. So that was interesting. I thought I was kind of surprised by that. So there may be long-term issues here, but again, also suppression of this kind of more luxurious or frivolous type lifestyle. Um, yeah, again, very practical here with Capricorn. But the eighth house is a moksha, so somehow this like, letting go of all this extra stuff is actually freeing in some ways. And there is a Jupiter aspecting this eighth house as well. So with the Saturn and Jupiter is in its own sign in the 12th house of loss and expenditures. Jupiter represents, how would I say, law, philosophy, charity, and optimism. So what I'm seeing here is that there's a suppression of like frivolous actions and even like suppression of optimism. And this Jupiter again in its own sign in the 12th house. Jupiter represents children, so this could be loss of children. They had a one child, per family policy. Philosophy, the philosophy's changed. The old philosophy's out the window. Spirituality, especially when you get this K2 Mercury Sun mix here. In the ninth house, this can be a division of church and state or religion and secular life, which is typical in, communist governments. Um, yeah, so yeah, it was interesting. So the Saturn in the eighth house with the aspected by Jupiter, it's a suppression of those things, yeah. Like it's like, we don't need this extra fluff. I mean, we'll manufacture it for other people, so we'll get the money. We won't, dole it out to our, or make it available to um, as much to our people, our citizens, as we're, it's more about you can, especially this Jupiter in its own sign in the 12th house here. I mean, this is all the 12th house can be about import export, and you can see it's like, on fire over here. That's what it's all about. So, then what do we have? So when you put, this stuff together, enjoying a sudden win, but there's long-term issues under frivolity, industrialize the public, and that's kind of what I was seeing here with this like moon. And I'll go through the other houses, and you can see there's like challenges to vocal expression, physical expression. You've got Mars on both the moon and Mars on the Venus. So you've got this like erratic Mars, violent disruption energy to moon and Venus, which are the two aesthetic planets, but also two arts planets. So it's like, creativity. This is like as we'll see a, suppression of creativity and communication in a lot of ways. Not that it's not there. I mean, there's still plenty of it, but again, it has to be like, I think authorized and regulated and stuff like that, right? You can't go too far out of bounds, I don't think. At least not in a big public way. Um, we have a Malavya yoga here that's Venus in its own sign, which again seems really great. And it's in Vishaka, which is sort of an antithesis to Venus because Venus is all about social grace and stuff, but Vishaka is about winning at all costs. And then you have Mars and Saturn on there. And with Saturn being exalted in Libra, that's going to definitely overpower Venus. So again, it's suppression and disruption of the arts. And there might be some kind of like even this moment in time, this 3 o'clock in the afternoon on October 1st moment, I'm sure there was like a parade. You know, like that's probably what this is. It like a parade or some kind of big, I don't even know what. I assume there was some with this combination, some kind of big fanfare moment here. Just showing off the win. We also have a Chandra Mangala yoga. That's the moon and Mars, a mutual aspect. That's a wealth yoga. So again, we're seeing money here. We have a pravraja yoga. That's the three planets in the ninth house here. That's a life focus combination. So again, all about changeover of the government. And you can see Mercury, K2 Sun here in this dual Earth sign. This is a you know, change of hands, like a you know passing on passing on the power, on the reins of the government. There's a budhaditya yoga here, so that's intelligence. And let me see, it's not qualified though. There's a Ubhayachari yoga here. That's a solar yoga. It's mixed. We have Venus on one side of the sun, and Saturn on the other. One's a benefic, one's a malefic. Saturn here on the 12th, in the 12th house from the sun, can be renowned, but it's Saturn here. So I think over time, Mao Zedong, overall, his reputation will diminish with time. Like if he had a benefic here, like Venus or Mercury or Jupiter, then he probably would have been very popular and well known through time. But I think, generally speaking, that probably is not the case at this point. But again, it depends on who you talk to, right? Um, and then we have an Anafa yoga here. That's a lunar yoga. That's the Jupiter in the 12th house from the moon. That's going to be a really nice boost to the moon. However, Jupiter's still in the 12th house of losses. So, it's helpful though. So the moon is not by itself. The other thing is a yogi here is Mars. So this disruptive energy here with Mars is actually wealth building for China. The Abha yogi here is Ketu. And then the duplicate yogi here is Mercury. So again, there's a kind of a shifting in wealth here, I would say. But also, like, I would say a bit erratic. Uh, and then I would also see like computers, technology, manufacturing stuff would be the main stuff that's going to bring money here, especially because Mars is also the um, what is it? The Lord of the 11th house of income. Okay, so the second house Lord is Saturn, and aspects of its own sign. It's going to bring out strength, and Mars is aspecting here as well. With this Saturn in Aquarius, again, it's all about fixed ideas because Aquarius is a fixed air sign, and the Mars here as well, disruption. Like I could see this being like censorship of speech and preventing, really wild and rebellious speech going on here. There's a containment here of speech. The third house, third lord is Jupiter. And Rahu is here in Revati. It's aspected by a debilitated Mercury. Well, Mercury is going to be debilitated in Pisces and Sun as well. This is again government oversight of communications and technology. So again, you have Saturn on the second house of oral communication. You have a debilitated Mercury with other malefics, in the third house. So written communication is also suppressed here. Fourth house lord is Mars. It's aspected by Venus and Jupiter. Venus is in Vishaka, Jupiter's in Uttarashada, again, that piercing victory energy. This Mars is also going to disrupt homes, happiness, education. It's going to shift all those things. Like whether you agree with how things went or not, there's going to be a big shift here. Like even for the government to say, okay, families can only have one child. I mean, some places in the world they would say like, that's not the place of the government to do, but in the system it is. So, and also education, there was a big shift in education in terms of what was taught, what was not taught, right? The fifth house here, fifth house lord is this Venus. It's aspected by Saturn and Ketu. So again, you have these two malefics here. Both of these, so when you have Saturn and Ketu on the fifth house like this, that's going to make, that's not also great. Like the Jupiter in the 12th house, even though it's Swa, Jupiter in the 12th house is not great for having children, and then Saturn and Ketu here also not great for having children. So again, not surprising that the one-child policy popped up. But this Saturn and Ketu on the fifth house, besides representing children, represents creativity and outward expression and public performances. It's all like, all shut down here. Very tightly controlled, if not totally shut down. Sixth house here, sixth house lord is Mercury. It's in Hasta, and this is aspected by Jupiter. So this is like a win over a government, philosophy, law, enemies. Law. So again, this is all about like winning over the enemies here, the sixth house. The seventh house I've mentioned, seventh house lord is Moon, aspected sound signs, so there's some strength here, but a debilitated Mars and Ashlesha. This is a disruption again with relationships and allies. Once they made this shift, it's like, okay, who's with us and who's not, Then the eighth house lord is Sun, Saturn's here in perfect Falguni, aspected by Jupiter. Again, I mentioned this. The thing that was also like Saturn is a pure temporal benefic, meaning it's the sign, and a temporal benefic is different from a natural benefic, so keep that in mind. But Saturn is a pure temporal benefic because it's the lord of two positive houses, but it's gone to a negative house. That usually brings negative consequences to the houses that it owns. So again, more negativity to the lugna here, the overall structure, as well as the second house of assets, as well as oral communication. And also potentially inner circle. Like again, if Big Brother is always listening or watching or something, that could divide people. But I would see long-term issues with identity, speech, children, optimism here. Ninth house lord is Swa, retrograde Mercury. So very mental, like a very rational, super hyper rational type of government. K2's in Chitra, alter of structure of communications, thoughts, authority. It's all going to change with this new thought process here. Government, religion, enemies, and again, separation of church and state. Like it's like I don't know if there's a complete suppression because, like, when I was in Beijing, I went and visited the Lama temple, so it's not like they burned everything down, and they still had monks there, chanting, from ancient scripts and stuff. It was actually cool to visit when I went to China, but um, so some stuff exists, but again, I'm sure there's like, controls on that stuff. Yeah. So to what extent, I have no idea though. 10th house lord, there's a Swa, Venus, uh, again, aspected by Mars and exalted Saturn. So again, manufacturing luxury good is the day-to-day operations here. That's a big source of the economy. 11th house lord is Mars. So again, this is public wages. And again, with Mars being disruptive, I mean, it's debilitated in the 7th house, but the moon is aspecting there. So it's kind of like there's independent business. However, it's like a co-op. So it's like, like I say. So it's not like individuals have so much power to be entrepreneurial, but what they did was they galvanized, the public and kind of like what I'm seeing here again, I don't know enough I don't hardly know anything about Chinese government politics or anything. So again, I'm not a political person. I'm just talking about the astrology here. They basically, based on this, what they did was they like galvanized people, like kind of industrialized the public and like, all their wages or whatever are thrown into one big pot and they all get like part of it. So it's like a co-op. That's how co-ops operate, like at least in the United States. So again, it's not like individuals get a chance to be entrepreneurial. Like, oh, I'm gonna, be a dentist and hang out a shingle, and oh, I'm gonna be like an accountant and hang out a shingle and just do my own thing. Like in the United States, I mean, everybody's got their, own thing going on or a side hustle going on or something like that. Um, Here, what it is, it's like the independent business is this galvanized public. So the whole country actually became like very entrepreneurial. Like it's a kind of a weird kind of a weird situation. Yeah, well, unusual situation. So, yeah, everybody just works and they work, they punch in, they punch out, and whatever, the wages are divided equally, it's like a co-op. Um, so the 12th house, again, this Swa Jupiter. So this is going to be this 12th house is excellent for import export, which China is the master of. However, there's a lot of loss with the things related to Jupiter. The other thing is Jupiter, whereas Saturn is a pure temporal benefic that's gone to a negative house, and that's going to bring negative consequences to the first and second house. Jupiter, since it's a pure temporal malefic, and in a Capricorn rising chart, Jupiter owns two negative houses, the third and the ninth. And you actually want, if you have a pure temporal malefic, you do prefer it going to a negative house for various reasons. And one of them is that it will actually kind of it's almost like two negatives create a positive. It will actually bring some benefit to the houses it represents. So again, this massive potential for import-export business. But again, loss of children, education, spirituality, philosophy also is involved here. All right, so again, a philosophical upheaval compared to the physical upheaval of Mount Vesuvius, but I think you're getting a picture, hopefully getting a picture of how these energies can play out in the real world. Okay, so then the sun in September. On the 8th of September, Sun and Saturn have an exact mutual aspect. This is going to be a power struggle between, again, leadership and proletariat. We were just talking about communist governments. I never say proletariat in real life. I only say it when I start seeing these charts. For some reason, it's kind of weird. But again, there's a tension between rest and reaction here. September 13th, Sun enters Uttara Phalguni Nakshatra, so developing a sense of purpose here. September 16th, Sun enters Virgo Kanya. It's a neutral sign. It's a dual Earth sign. It's going to be conjoined with K2, which is a bit unstable of an energy of a planet, with a debilitated Venus, which isn't great, but at least it's still Venus, a natural benefic, aspected by Mars, Jupiter, and a parivartana with Mercury. So it's like loading up. The eclipse is loading up here. So there's going to be great initiative with the Sun, two leadership planets, Sun and Mars, but abrupt change, pragmatic leadership because it's an Earth sign, confusion, legal law issues potentially, communication issues. It's all up for grabs potentially. September 26th, Sun enters Hasta Nakshatra, so this is like gaining control, or releasing control. It could be also September 28th. Sun crosses K2, so this could be a big push forward or a big surrender. Like this is the big grab it or let it go moment here. Fork in the road. Sudden shift in work, purpose, soul direction. Those are all things represented by the sun. And October 2nd, solar eclipse in Virgo. So yeah, energy is building here in Virgo. So, keep watching out for your, whatever house Virgo's in for you. Okay, so then this last kind of planet slide here are the slow movers. So Jupiter, or Guru, Saturn, or Shani, and Rahu and Ketu. Now most of these, I'll roll through this quickly because most of these I've already talked about in the previous slide. So check out previous slides for the kind of interpretation. The only thing I haven't mentioned again is the Ketu. Once Mercury moves into the sign Ketu's in, since Mercury is the dispositor owner of the sign Ketu's in, K2 will aspect 5 and 9 away. So you'll have this like erratic K2 energy in all the earth signs, which are Virgo, Capricorn, and Taurus. So it's going to bring more, frankly, chaos or unexpected events. Whether it's good, it can be good chaos. It's not always bad chaos. Chaos has a bad rap, I guess. It can be like a surprise, whatever, proposal or a surprise raise or, a surprise new job or a surprise trip. It could be, all kinds of good surprises. Let me just roll through the dates though so that we complete. So September 5th, Venus crosses K2. September 8th, Sun and Saturn have an exact mutual aspect. September 16th, Mars has an exact aspect on K2. So you can see there's a lot of K2 influence here. September 17th is a lunar eclipse. September 18th is Saturn and Mercury have an exact mutual aspect. September 23rd, K2 aspects 5 and 9 away. So Virgo, Capricorn, Taurus all have K2 energy for a while. September 28th, Sun crosses K2. September 29th, Venus crosses K2. So you can see that also all these, Venus crossing K2 and Saturn and all this, a lot of disruptive energy. So it's like expect the unexpected. Besides the lunar and solar eclipses coming up. Yeah. So yeah, roll with it, roll with the waves here, ride the waves. And October 2nd is a solar eclipse coming up. All right. Okay, so one more chart here. And this chart is the attack of 9/11 that happened in New York City in the year of 2001. So I live pretty close to New York, and I know some people around here still get triggered by hearing about this event. So if that's the case, just shut this off now or move on, so you don't have to hear it. But again, the astrology is fairly interesting. And the other thing is that, again, there's quite a few similarities to the current sky pattern. So if you're up for it, here, let's go through this, the attack of 9/11. So this happened on 11th of September, 2001. And this moment that I have set here is 8:19 a.m. This was the first alert from a plane because what happened was terrorists hijacked 4 airplanes and they crashed 2 of them into the Twin Towers in New York City, and then the third one crashed into the Pentagon, and another one crashed, I think, in Pennsylvania. Um, so the first alert from a flight, I think it was a flight attendant or somebody on a plane that, the planes were hijacked, happened at 8:19. Okay, so the Lugna nakshatra is in Hasta. So we've been talking about Hasta. It's the hand grabbing and releasing, right? And you have Mercury in Virgo. So that's similar already. The Sun nakshatra is in Purva Falguni. So again, that hammock, enjoyment, enjoying the finer things of life. That Sun is in the 12th house of losses and expenditures. So the end of enjoyment here. Everybody was on this plane going somewhere or going into the Twin Towers to start their day, and then, it all went to pot pretty quickly. So, then the Moon nakshatra is in Mrigashirsha. This is a seeking energy. Mrigashirsha nakshatra is symbolized by a deer's head, so it's like this, like that very common folklore literature type analogy of the deer going through the forest and finding their way through unknown territory. So again, this is the moon, the mind, public, finding their way through this mess, frankly. And you do see that the moon is with, again, Rahu and Ketu. And as I mentioned, Rahu and Ketu by themselves can indicate things like mental health issues. But when you start getting Moon and Mercury wrapped up, or on the Rahu Ketu axis as well, then you get even more of that mental and emotional challenge energy. And it clearly was that kind of moment in time. The day lord here is Mars, and the Hora lord, or our lord, is Sun. So the two leadership planets here. But Mars is all about fighting, and Sun is all about authority. And you can see here, once again, we have Mars within about a degree of K2 here. So Mars is crossing K2. So in all the charts that I found, and I wasn't looking for this, I was looking for actually Mercury in Virgo and Sun in Virgo and that sort of thing. Like I was trying to find charts like that. And all of these charts have Mercury in Virgo, which I think was also kind of like an overriding, again, piece of advice. I felt like it was a piece of advice coming through of like, meditate, calm the mind, um, try to stay a little bit objective if possible through these events so you don't completely lose your balance, was what I was getting. But again, we have another circumstance here with Mars and Ketu. Okay, so the two erratic planets, up against each other. And Mars and Ketu are in Mula, which we talked about extensively with that Mount Vesuvius chart. So death and destruction. And yeah, so a big disruptor here. And what else do we have? So Mars is also the fighting energy here. And we're running, let's see, then the birth Shah here is Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Venus. So Venus and Jupiter are the two planets representing people. Venus is in Ashlesha. We've talked about that. That's that snake energy. So, and that's in the 11th house of clubs, groups, and society. So there's a lot of, again, loss of life here. Not just with Venus and Ashlesha, but Sun represents, life here. Health. So there's loss of health here. Luckily, to some extent, well, Sun is in its own sign. So inanimate things might be protected here. The two buildings completely collapsed, so not that, but maybe it could have been worse. I don't know. It seemed like it was bad enough, but it's hard to imagine it was worse, but I guess things can always be worse, right? Um, but the sun in its own sign, the 12th house, won't protect people. So, also Mercury and Jupiter are news, media, communication. So news of a fight, loss of people here. So kind of like with the Mount Vesuvius, this is like, getting the word out to people, right? News, like it's Mercury in its own sign, and then Jupiter in mercurial sign here. This is Rahu, technology, moon here. This is like this Jupiter Rahu moon mix in the 10th house here, a combination in the 10th house. This is like this, you know, uh, television broadcast. You could say public television broadcast or communication broadcast. I remember I was living in Chicago at the time, and I had my whatever little TV, and I remember, and I don't even watch TV. I was a busy graduate student. I didn't have time to watch TV, but for some reason I had the TV on when this was happening, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, A plane crashed." You see the one plane crash, and you're just like, "Wow, did that really happen? Like, how did they crash?" And then the second one happened. You're like, "Oh, this wasn't an accident. It was like a purposeful thing." So it was just like so, surreal to like watch that actually happen on TV. And I have friends who were living in New York at the time. They still actually get triggered by this whole thing. So again, I don't mean to trigger anybody. And I know the charts I'm showing today are intense. Um, so, forgive me for that. But again, just take a deep breath, meditate or whatever, like this Mercury in its own sign keeps telling us to do. Yeah. So then let's see, we have, so the current, how does this chart recreate the current sky plan? Well, Sun and Mercury are both Swa. Mars is in the same degree of K2, and Saturn is not in Aquarius, but it's aspecting Aquarius again. So there are similarities. So let's go through house by house. So the Lagna is in Virgo or Kanya, dual earth signs with Vibhava Prithvi. The Lagnesha is Swa, Digbala, Bhavat, Bhavam, Mercury in asta. And it's in a Dharmasthana. So this massive Mercury is super strong, actually. So it's in its own sign. It also has Digbala directional strength. That gives it strength and power. It's also Bhavat Bhavam. The first lord has gone to the first house. So this is all about, self and identity and duty, that kind of thing. Now, again, this chart, because it's a dual earth sign, you can read this from a perspective of almost anybody involved in this event. So you can read this from the perspective of the hijackers. You can read this from the perspective of the victims of the event. You can read this from the perspective of the governments, the authorities involved on both sides. So yeah. So duty, so we put this together so far. Duty, grabbing control, self, mind, news, detached, cleansing. So I was actually mostly getting the initial motivation for the hijackers to go through with this, because as far as I understand, I think there are multiple reasons for them, the reasons why they claim they did this. Part of it was about like getting the United States out of the Middle East and the different relationships the United States had with different countries in the Middle East and treatment of Muslims and all this kind of stuff. Um, So anyway, it was basically it was a big message, which Mercury represents message communication. It was a big communication. Um, to tell the United States, like, stay out of our business, essentially, was what they were doing. And, because also part of it, like, I guess their thought, at least the groups involved here, pretty fundamental, or pretty fundamentalist, and they were, I guess, part of what I was reading, I don't know, but part of what I was reading was that they believe that if, just having different parts of the Middle East inhabited by non-Muslims was like tainting the area. So again, this is kind of like actually if you saw my when I analyzed the chart for Jesse Owens winning the gold medal in Berlin Olympics, there's a similar kind of energy here where it's like this is it's almost like an ethnic cleansing type vibe, you know. It's like yeah. So anyway, yeah, again, it's more than my mind can really handle, but there's a little bit of that. Okay. So anyway, trying to get things in order here and cleansed and clear. Um, yeah. So anyway, again, whether you agree with it or not, that's a whole different thing. So I'm not trying to stir the pot with that. I'm sure these things always do, regardless of how I just try to stick with the astrology. But it is what it is. These things tend to fire people up. So without me intending to, again, I'm just trying to demonstrate the energies in the sky, different energy in the sky. So what else we have here? Kala Sarpa yoga here. So there's ambition and also this strange, hidden energy, unexpected. Yeah, I mean, who knew this was, well, I guess they did. I was reading they did know they did have some clues that this was going to happen. I guess I don't know, maybe not enough clues to stop it or get, whatever. There's a pravraja yoga here, this Jupiter Rahu moon mix in the 10th house. That's a life focus. Kesari yoga here, the Jupiter moon together. So again, networking, news getting out, people talking about this. There's a Subhayachari yoga here. So this Venus, it's kind of odd. This Venus in the 12th house from the sun. This is going to make the sun. There's going to bring renown to the sun here. So this is like a renowned, profound loss, that, we're still talking about. And again, since I live so close to Connecticut, so close to New York, I live in Connecticut, and a lot of people from Connecticut commute to New York every day on the train. We have memorials here for people who commuted to New York and, died in the attack every year. So, that happens here. And what else? We have a Duradara lunar yoga here because we have Venus on one side, Saturn on the other. It's Mishra though, so there's going to be a mixed bag, but there's support for the moon, despite it being so challenged with like Mars and Rahu and all this. Um, there's a Chandra Mangala yoga again, so this is all about wealth as well. Like we saw in the People's Republic of China chart. The yogi is Mars, Avayogi is Ketu. Duplicate yogi is Saturn. So Mars and Saturn indicate some level of wealth, and Ketu the opposite. So with Mars and Ketu here, you know, um, disruption in home, land, work, emotions, purity, I would even say. Um, yeah. So again, it's like there's some protection because Jupiter is aspecting its own sign in the fourth house. So even though like it was a lot, I mean, I don't know if any of you visited. I visited the memorial that they set up at the side of the Twin Towers. I never went to the original Twin Towers, but it's like this huge fountain that seems like it's just gushing water, endlessly. It's really intense. I don't know. I found it kind of disturbing. Maybe that's what it's meant to do, but um, anyway, it's there. So yeah, what else do we have here? Yeah, Mars crossing K2, that's very disruptive energy for, again, the fourth house issues. So home, land, work, And also the Mars K2 the Mars is aspecting the 10th house of work. I mean, this is a place of work, and the whatever planes hit within about half an hour of the 8:19 time. Um, so yeah, I mean, just when people were starting to get to work, it's like, boom, So, and the other thing is Mars, for a Virgo chart, Mars is really important because one, Mars represents enemies, but the other thing is Mars is a pure temporal malefic because it owns two dishtanas, two negative houses, the third house and the eighth house. And Mars has gone to a positive house here. So that means that Mars is going to bring a lot of negativity to, positive spaces. You can think about it that way. So Mars, you always got to watch in a Virgo lugna chart. Okay, so sorry, I didn't mean this to get really heavy. I wasn't sure if I should go through this chart or not, but I decided that in the end, maybe somebody needed to hear this or see this or something. So anyway, let's go through the other houses. So the second house lord is Venus. It's an Ashlesha. It's aspected by Jupiter and Ardra. So again, sad news, loss of people, groups, money, because Venus is coming. Is located in the 11th house there. Um, and close loved ones as well, because Venus is the lord of the second house of inner circle. So a lot of people talking and losses there. Third house lord is Mars. Mars is in Mula. Again, destructive energy here. It's aspected by Saturn. And Saturn's in Rohini. So that was kind of funny too. It's almost like in the other charts where we saw Sun and Purva Falguni and like enjoyment and stuff, like Saturn and Rohini. Rohini is like one of the nakshatras that's like the most attractive and beautiful and that sort of thing. When I see Saturn and Rohini typically in charts, I usually think of like architecture and sculpture because Saturn is literally like earth and metal. And that's essentially like, I'm not sure if Twin Towers were government buildings per se, but they were represent you in this chart, they were representative, I mean, of the United States government. I guess you could see it that way. They were property of the United States government. So, yeah, really expensive and beautiful buildings. So, um, yeah, so destruction of beautiful structure. Yeah, so then the fourth house lord is Jupiter. It aspects its own. So there's some protection. It may not have seemed like it, but then Mars and Ketu are Mula, very destructive, chaotic energy from the nakshatra point of view as well as the planetary point of view. Aspected also by the moon. Sudden physical and emotional rupture, disruption of property, public, and also again ejecting of foreigners. Like again, it's like with this cleansing of the Middle East, of I guess non-Muslims, but also Americans and American influence. That was what this is message. A very strong message was all about. So the fifth house lord is a bhavam Saturn, aspected by Venus as well. So yeah, Saturn. So Saturn is a bhavam because it's the fifth house lord and it's gone 5 houses away to the ninth house. So you could see this as the fifth house represents a stage um, of this loss of people, but also this something that's gonna like this is unfortunately a story that's gonna pass down through generations because it was such a big deal. This is actually the deadliest terror attack in history, not just the United States, but in history. So I mean, who wants to, God, hopefully nobody beats that record. This is bad enough. So yeah, we have enough of that all over the place, don't we? Anyway, what else? Sixth house lord is Saturn, aspected by its own. It's aspecting its own sign. There's going to be strength here, Jupiter and Sun. So this is overseas authority because the Sun in its own sign in the 12th house. That's like an overseas authority. Is trying from their perspective, trying to create justice from their philosophy. whether you agree with it or not, again, different story, but it is what it is. And the seventh house lord is Jupiter. It's aspected by Mars and Mercury. Disruption in business, travel, communication. Yes, all the above. Eighth house here. Eighth house lord is Mars. It's aspected by Ketu. Deep destructive thoughts. I mean, just the eighth house is psychology. This is just like, you know, I mean, beyond devious. Devious is the word that comes to mind, but seems kind of mild, actually. Then the ninth house lord is Venus. So Venus is again is a shlesha. This is groups of people, suddenly strange, dying in a strange way. When I see planets in uh, v- uh, um, important planets in a shlesha, um, uh, and then people run those planets, they can often like pass away from just strange, unusual events. Like Whitney Houston has, I think, at least one or two planets in Shalesha, and she passed away by drowning in a bathtub in a hotel or something like that. And then what was even stranger was her daughter ended up doing the same. I mean, that was like bizarre. And then Kobe Bryant, he's an NBA player, and he died like in a helicopter accident or something like that. Just like weird, unusual things. So, and that's the case here, this like weird, strange way that people were, killed essentially. Then what do we have? Yeah, and then the ninth house here, the Lord is Venus and Saturn and Rohini. So beautiful traditional structures and authority. Also old religion, you could see it that way. This is a religious influence, involved in the communication. You can see it aspecting the third house here of non-oral communication, which essentially, um, slamming two airplanes into a high-rise building, a skyscraper. I mean, that's a different way of communicating. And then the Saturn is also aspecting the sixth house of enemies, and it's also aspecting the 11th house of clubs, group societies. And the other thing is that well, we'll get there, I guess. So wait, let me wait. So yeah, religion was part of this. Then the 10th house here, 10th house lord is Mercury. We've got Jupiter here with Rahu and Ardra. Jupiter and Rahu are both in Ardra. So remember from the Mount Vesuvius chart, this is like, a storm in the sky. So this isn't like a rainstorm, like they had a tsunami, during the Mount Vesuvius, situation. But this is like the planes crashing in the sky, with explosion in the sky. And again, Jupiter represents the sky, and the 10th house represents the sky. So there's some, unusual, strange storm in the sky. News about ambitious elimination of public. That's the Rahu is ambition and um, yeah, again, the destruction of life, and then again the Jupiter in the 10th house sky plus technology of the Rahu. This is like airplanes. Um, then the 11th house lord is the moon, which again is in Mrigashirsha. Now the thing is, if we take this a day later, moon is going to be in the nakshatra of Ardra as well. So then you're going to have three planets in Ardra. And again, Ardra is represented by a drop of water. The drop of water can be from a storm cloud, or it can be from like a tear. It can be a tear. So there's going to be massive public sadness from this event. Like, this day it's just all kind of blowing up. Probably people are just in shock and that, and the next day when it finally like hits what actually happened, it's like just an outpouring. And then it's going to really hit the fan too, because then there are all these like reactions, inflammatory reactions and response. Like it just got crazy for a long time, actually. Um, so what else? The 11th house. Okay, so the Lord is Moon, Venus aspected by Mars and Saturn. So you got two malefics on Venus here. So when you get Mars and Saturn together, that's usually engineered. So this is an organized action to eliminate people and wealth in an unusual, sudden, shocking manner. 12th house, again, the 12th house lord is a Swa sun. It's aspected by Ketu, so again, a disruption of overseas authority. That was the motivation here, right? So just a few notes. So again, terrorists hijacked 4 airplanes, crashed 2 into the twin towers. That was also interesting to me. Twin towers, like, and we have a dual Earth sign here in the Lugna, a Virgo. I mean, twin towers, twin property, two Earth. Yeah. Anyway, that was again like small detail that was like wow. Anyway, and also the Pentagon got hit, so the head of the military operations in Washington D.C. got hit by a third plane. 3,000, about almost 3,000 people died. The towers collapsed. Also, there was $10 billion in infrastructure that was like wiped out, and there were global market shocks. For I think at least a week after this. I don't know how long, but just everybody felt this. And again, from the terrorist point of view, this was a holy war. And then in response, the United States said they were starting a war on terrorism. So again, you get two sides of the same, kind of two sides of the story, depending on who's telling the story here. And again, that goes back to this dual Earth sign here, right? And again, I don't know how they determine these things, but apparently this is considered the deadliest terror attack in history. So, which is amazing because it seems like terrorist attacks happen way too often all around the world. So, yeah. Anyway, so at any rate, again, more demonstrations of how some of these energies manifest. And again, I don't mean to put these things out there because again, the reason why these charts exist is because these are like particularly virulent moments in life that have persisted through history. That doesn't mean that the eclipses coming up are going to be anything near this, and hopefully not. So again, take all this with a grain of salt. Don't freak yourselves out. Um, and again, at the end of the day, when stuff happens, like actually this Mars and Ketu in Mula, we had this happen recently. It was a few years ago. Mars crossed Ketu in Mula, and that's when the whole coronavirus, COVID virus pandemic started. So, we this and so is actually this attack of 9/11 with the global influences, like the global shock and stuff like that. We basically went through this with the COVID um, outbreak a few years back. So, yeah. So again, just take a deep breath, meditate, and just remember it's just we're just talking astrology here, okay? All right, so if you like to be your own astrologer, what you can do is find out where Virgo and Pisces are in your chart. Because even though, because those are where the 2 eclipses are coming up, and that's where a lot of the planetary energies are going to be. So if you look at this little schematic on the right here, this is a blank North Indian style chart. Again, the first house is this top diamond in the middle, and to go to the other houses, you count counterclockwise, second house, third house, fourth house, blah, blah, blah. So what I've listed here is just a few words of what these houses represent. I have videos on all the 12 houses now, so if you want a lot of detail about other things that these houses represent, I would check out the, first house, seventh house, whatever you're interested in. But like, let's say you have Pisces in the 8th house, okay? 8th house represents chronic disease, death, bankruptcy, and the occult, okay? So things like Jyotish, actually, Vedic astrology. So again, the 8th house, even though it's considered the kind of nastiest of the Dushtana negative houses, there's good stuff that can come through the 8th house. Like actually, when I was running planets in my 8th, usually when people are running planets in their 8th house, they're interested in astrology. And, things like yoga and Ayurveda and other esoterica and stuff like that. So if you have Pisces in your 8th house, and then when we have the lunar eclipse that comes up, because the lunar eclipse is going to happen in Pisces, you may get a sudden burst of interest in some kind of occult thing, like maybe Jyotish Vedic astrology, because Rahu's in there. There's going to be ambition, and Rahu in the 8th house gives somebody, again, an alternative mindset, like they're interested in alternative things. And then Venus will be, even though Venus is debilitated in your second house, where Virgo is, it's going to be exalted in the eighth house. And the moon's going to be there. So Venus and moon, those are the two aesthetic planets and arts planets here. There could be some sudden, again, interest in things like alternative art or maybe alternative aesthetics, because again, Venus and moon are going to be aspecting the second house of clothing. Um, and so it might be like you might suddenly get like new clothes or decide you want to like change your style or something like that. It could be. So just to give you one example, yeah. So anyway, you can see the first and seventh house. This is an axis. The first, they're across from each other. So first house represents self, personality, health, reputation. Seventh house represents spouse, partnership, independent business. And you have the 2-8 house axis, the 3-9 house axis. And on the next slide, you get the other one. So 4-10 axis, 5-11 axis, 6-12 axis. So again, so you can get a little bit more information about your chart, but again, to really do it well, I'd probably want to talk to, an astrologer about it. Because again, sometimes what I see with people that are interested in astrology, they have some information and then they get lost or they misinterpret things or they don't kind of have enough context and stuff, and sometimes they freak themselves out, and they kind of do damage to themselves. So you don't want to do that to yourself. um yeah, so anyway, but if you want a little bit more information, here's a little bit here, and then again, videos on all the houses if you want in-depth info about that. Okay, so as always, thank you for your time. Appreciate you hanging out with me, listening to one of my talks, and all the other support you give my work in the channel. So, liking videos and subscribing and sending in donations and comments that you post, questions, it's all good stuff. So thank you for all of that. All of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are in my consult playlist. They can be found there. If you're looking for more famous charts like the 3 I did in here, I have a whole bunch of charts I've done on the channel, but you can't tell from the titles of the videos most of the time. So if you look at the birth chart archive list 2024 video, you can see all the different charts I've done. So if you want other interesting stuff that way, or you like to learn astrology that way, I do offer individual birth chart readings live on Zoom and as pre-recorded video. If that's of interest, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com. I have another YouTube channel on natural medicine. The name of the name of the channel is Nature Source Care. But what I talk about is other types of Vedic arts like Ayurveda, which is traditional Indian medicine, and yoga, and then also other paradigms of medicine like homeopathy, naturopathic medicine. So if that's interesting to you, that's out there. Yeah, I think that's it for now. Talked a long, long time today, as always, but even longer than usual. So. Yeah, thanks for if you made it this far, thanks for hanging out with me for the whole thing. All right, so as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. I know the energies are maybe a little bit intense this month, but again, we'll get through it. All right, best we can. So take a deep breath and we'll ride those waves. All right, so take good care. Until next one, namaste.